Henrico residents likely know the name Patterson as one of the roads they drive, a well-traveled thoroughfare running straight as an arrow, east to west, through the heart of Tuckahoe District. The road's namesake is probably an afterthought.
I think it's significant when you have that because that tells the story of Henrico's past. I believe Malvern was named for his son, Malvern Patterson. And so you get a sense of who was in the area at the time. And it's just, it adds to the heritage of a place.
But in his day, Dr. Richard Archibald Patterson was anything but an afterthought. He was a giant of industry, an innovator and craftsman whose products were in demand worldwide and whose success helped Richmond recover from the devastation of Civil War. He was the creator of an iconic brand that still resonates in American pop culture. He was a respected businessman and public servant whose leadership was sought in political as well as commercial circles. He was a physician, a Civil War surgeon, a gentleman farmer, and an encouraging father.
Well, I think, you know, he was a man of many talents, obviously. He was everything from a bank president at one point. He taught Sunday school and just a wide range of interests in between. He was, I guess, sort of a Renaissance man for his time.
Richard Archibald Patterson was born in 1826 in Caroline County, the second of 4 children of Thomas and Susan Patterson. The family moved to Henrico County in 1834, settling a few miles west of Richmond at a place called Paradise Farm. Not much is known of his youth, though it's clear he had few opportunities for a formal education. But showing signs of the resolve and determination that would serve him well later, Patterson studied on his own and took lessons when he could at an old field school.
He was still a young fellow, and he would have grown up on a farm in that culture of where they had slaves who worked the property. And certainly located where it is in proximity to the city of Richmond, a very desirable farm because they could have taken their goods and produce to the city to sell. Unfortunately, his father died a year later in 1835, so he was only 9 years old when his father died, and his mother took over the operation of the farm. So clearly there were quite a bit of things expected of him as being the second oldest son in the family. And I'm sure he felt that obligation throughout his entire life. But he did have other interests that he felt like he could pursue, and that's what he did.
In 1846, at the age of 20, he gained admission to the nearby Richmond College. After a single session at the school, known today as the University of Richmond, Patterson was ready to move on. He began studies in the medical department of what would become the Medical College of Virginia. He graduated in 1848, moved farther west to Mannequin in Goochland County, and established a general practice.
Patterson had as much and maybe better medical training than most. He attended one of the better medical schools that was available in the United States. It probably made him one of the better trained, quote-unquote country doctors around, because a lot of people who practiced medicine in the mid-19th century had many had no training at all. They apprenticed with another country doctor who probably didn't have any training at all.
The young doctor chose to relinquish his medical practice, but not his title. Despite the change of careers, he would always be known as Dr. Patterson.
In 1850, Patterson left his medical practice to become the plant manager for his uncle, James Thomas, who had a tobacco factory down near the river. In 1853, he and T.C. Williams founded their own partnership together, appropriately titled Patterson and Williams, and in 1856 opened their 1,600 square foot tobacco factory at 7th and Overton in downtown Richmond.
Tobacco had long been the linchpin of the Virginia economy, and Richmond was ideally located to receive raw materials and distribute finished goods.
Patterson's first tobacco factory was located on the riverfront, very near what's now the Tredegar Iron Works. Prior to the Civil War, it fronted just on what's today Tredegar Street, near 7th. At the time, it was called 7th and Overton. And this was a perfectly fine tobacco factory until the Civil War, when during the evacuation fire, it was destroyed.
While devoting time and energy to starting his business, Patterson was also busy starting a family. He had married Margaret Courtney of Henrico in 1851, and over the next decade, the couple had 4 sons. The arrival of Civil War in 1861 signaled a change in fortune for Patterson's business and family. The firm of Patterson and Williams ceased operations. Patterson moved his family back to Henrico County, to his boyhood home at Paradise Farm. He then enlisted as an infantryman in the Army of Northern Virginia.
Henrico County becomes a battlefield. More than most places, Henrico County becomes a battlefield. There are places in the Confederacy that probably never saw a Union or a Confederate soldier. Henrico County is some of the most fought over ground in all of the United States today.
Patterson never saw combat as a foot soldier. The record isn't clear, but it's quite likely that his medical training was too valuable to let him stand the lines with a musket. In 1862, he was commissioned assistant surgeon of the 56th Virginia Regiment.
Because the medical challenges during the war were immense, both armies, North and South, tried to develop a more efficient way to deal with the quantity of wounded, because the need was just so immense. I mean, you know, there's a regiment of soldiers is 1,000 people, and there were only 2 medical professionals assigned to that entire group of soldiers. They were completely outnumbered, and so anyone who knew anything about medicine would have been probably welcome in a position like that.
I'm sure it was quite an experience for a doctor that had been a small-time general practitioner to see the massive influx of disease and problems in the hospital, as well as the massive trauma that he would see in the field. When Dr. Patterson chose to enter the commissioned officer status and be assigned to a field unit, he was foregoing the luxury of being in a fixed facility and probably closer to home, and accepting the hardships of campaigning. The assistant surgeon with the unit was the soldier's doctor who camped and marched with the men and was available fairly near the battle line to provide immediate attention if they were wounded. The surgeon was usually further back out of danger. The assistant surgeons in particular would set up an aid station just 100 yards or so behind the line, where they would receive the wounded men and try to stop serious bleeding and splint fractures.
I mean, it's hard to say exactly what all of the various permutations of wounds that all of the flying lead and iron could produce on a human body.